Today's webinar is based on the book Lifelong Leadership, Woven Together Through Mentoring Communities by MaryKate Morse. You can find the book at lifelongleadershipbook.com. Leighton Ford joins MaryKate in this webinar, sponsored by Nav Press.
And encourage those who have a passion to lead more like Jesus and to Jesus. I feel like I'm an old soul who loves lifting up the next generation of leaders. I believe this is what Jesus modeled for with his disciples and followers. And of course, a message without messengers doesn't last very long. I'm here with my dear mentor and friend of 25 years, Leighton Ford, who lives in Charlotte, North Carolina. So we're on opposite ends of the United States. Leighton spent 30 years as an international evangelist with Billy Graham. He also served as the program chair for Lausanne, a global movement committed to connecting influencers and ideas to Christ's mission. He has a ministry called LFM, Leighton Ford Ministries, dedicated to investing in the next generation of leaders. So today, Leighton describes himself as an artist of the soul and a friend on the journey. So we both are happy to have you here. We welcome you. Please, you could join us on this webinar on 3 keys to transformational leadership using mentoring communities. So I'll start us off, and then Leighton will be speaking after me, and I'll transition to him. So right now, every one of us, everywhere in the entire world, is in the midst of a global pandemic due to the coronavirus. This is one of those times which will be forever etched into our life stories, and it is a difficult story. As leaders, we are experiencing a lot of disruption, a lot of changes, and have you noticed how much louder social media noise is? There's constant and polarizing messages about the virus and all the implications of it. Our email boxes and social media feeds have a huge uptick in postings and blogs. There's so many virtual meetings that they kind of wear us down. I think there's a strange noise to this COVID-19, which fills up our minds and our souls and our hearts. There's also a strange new seclusion with sheltering in place orders, social distancing, face masks, isolations, and now these phasing in, trying to get back to normal, whatever that's going to look like. So besides the obvious challenges of this disease, I believe a deeper challenge has been unveiled for leaders. I think the challenge has always been there, but with our running around, our busyness, going here and there, all the words and meetings and things we do, I think we sometimes miss our deepest desires. I think sometimes we don't know how lonely we really are. We don't recognize that our souls are crowded. We aren't aware that as we are busy for Christ, sometimes we are leaving Christ out of our lives. And this is what I'm hearing from leaders, young and old. They're recognizing a profound hunger for spaciousness in their lives and souls, to be with Christ, and the deepest yearning for meaningful conversations and companionships. We are tired of running around doing things that result in little fruit. So this webinar will introduce mentoring communities. These mentoring communities provide spiritual and emotional spaciousness and lifelong companions for those on the ministry journey, no matter what is happening in the world. These mentoring communities are a simple, effective way to strengthen leaders in Christ for the full life of their calling. And these mentoring communities invest in the next generation of leaders. Now, this discovery came out of 30 years of experiences in diverse Christian and cultural environments all over the world. This discovery came out of many hours of listening to the Spirit for a better way to nurture each generation of leaders. Now, Leighton, who is the father of this wisdom, will start us off by sharing the story of mentoring communities. So Leighton, I'll turn it over to you.
Well, good morning, Mary-Kate. Good morning, everybody. This is a rainy day here in our home in North Carolina, where Jeannie and I, my wife and I, and our dog Buddy, who may make an unplanned appearance on. We've been in for a couple of months, so to be able to Zoom with you is very special. And I want to start by saying thank you to Mary-Kate, who's been not only the author and compiler of this book, but also in many ways the one who helped us to develop the architecture, you can call it that, of our mentoring community. Everybody can chat and say thank you, Mary-Kate, if you want to. And some of you I know, like Barry Watley up in Quebec, and Grizzle in Virginia that I know are on today, and's been the chair of our mentoring community. I know you're on today. Some of you I've never met. I hope I will. But thanks to Mary-Kate for asking me to give a bit of background here. I think I need to do this in terms of those who have been important mentors in my own life. Let me go back. I will take a long time doing this, to when I was 14, growing up in southwestern Ontario, Canada. And it was a difficult time for our family. And my mother had become emotionally ill and left for months. It was a lonely time. And at a summer conference, I heard someone talk about prayer by taking the book of Psalms and turning them into a prayer. And I began to do that, and the presence of the Lord became so real to me. And it was that year that a man came to our hometown in Canada, a man named Evan Headley, who died at 104 a couple of years ago. He came to Christ, and he appointed me as the president because he thought I was 17 because I was tall, and I was only 14. He must have had a heart attack when he realized what he'd done. But he stuck with me, gave me ideas, corrected me sometimes, sent speakers our way, introduced me to the whole evangelism thrust of Youth for Christ. And for one of those Youth for Christ rallies, Billy Graham came and spoke to our hometown. I just couldn't wait for that, because even back then, Billy gave the word, gave the invitation, people would respond, except they didn't, not that night. There was one young girl who made a dedication to the Lord. But I remember I was so disappointed that we hadn't seen a greater response openly. And Billy came over and put her arm around my shoulder and prayed with me and said, I believe if you stay humble, God will use you. He's given us this desire to make people know Christ. And he became a mentor to me. Later, of course, I married his sister. So he had invited me to join his team for a year, but he couldn't fire me because I was married to his sister. But Billy really was a mentor, not so much in the sense closely one-on-one, but watching him, watching how he prayed, seeing how he preached, open doors that he gave to me, opportunities that he gave to me. So as a big brother, he was an important mentor. And then I became involved in the Lausanne Committee, now the Lausanne Movement. And the chairman of that before me was an Anglican bishop from Australia named Jack Dane, who gave over that position because he was busy. And I became the chairman of the Lausanne Movement. But Jack had come into those meetings and serving me, an older man serving younger. He'd bring me a glass of water, a cup of tea. He'd tell me who was not in agreement. Insist when I flew into the airport in Australia, pick up my bags. 15 years older than I was, but Jack embodied what Jesus said to the elder serving the younger. So I look back on Evan Headley, I look on Billy, I look on Jack Dane. To me, they're kind of like Paul, who wrote to Timothy and said, stir up that flame that is within you. And then there came a loss in our lives. About the time I was 50, Jeannie and I, my wife and I, began to sense perhaps there was something different the Lord had for us after 30 years of worldwide evangelism. And we began to pray about that. And it was right around that time that our son, Sandy, who was 21, third-year student at university, had an old heart problem that came back, heart arrhythmia problem. I had to undergo a heart surgery for the second time, and he did not survive. Huge loss, left a big space in our hearts. But out of that, in part, God gave to me the sense, maybe the next calling is to help to raise up that next generation of young men and women who will run their race as Sandy did for the Lord. And so then we eventually began Leighton Ford. I remember especially being in Norway. I think we have someone from Norway on the call here today. But I was in Norway leading a meeting of the Lausanne Committee, and we had some big decisions. We weren't quite sure what to do. And as chairman, I said, let's stop and just pray for a while. So we took an hour and prayed. And I remember a young man from England quoted Isaiah 43:18 and 19. Remember not the former things, I'm doing a new thing. And that was like an arrow to my own heart, to say the next thing is to help the young men and women that God is raising up, to listen to them, to encourage them, to know their hearts, to share with them, to give them opportunities. And that's been a joy of mine now for these last 30 plus years. The early years were wonderful. These recent years have been even more so. So MaryKate, I'm glad to, you and I, friends and colleagues, thank you for writing this book, Lifelong Leadership, which tells about this organic kind of mentoring, which I think is so very important. So I've got a debt to repay for the mentors in my own life. And let me hand it back to you with a quote from, I heard recently, someone said that the leadership of the future will not be through tall buildings, silos, or whatever they are, but paths from house to house. Interesting. Not through the tall structures, but paths from house to house, which is what we're doing today. Most of us in our own house. So I think God has given us this vision of the mentoring communities of lifelong leadership to help all of us keep the fire burning for the long run. So I'm glad to be here. I want to listen to each one of you.
Thank you, Leighton. Thank you, Leighton. His dream, his passion to make a difference for Christ, not by preaching in programs only, but primarily by investing in people, became the dream for many of us. So it's no surprise to all of you that ministry is very challenging. The 24/7 nature of ministry, the high expectations people have of those in ministry and their families, the messy and often mean conflicts that regularly occur, the burnout that can come from the demands of ministry, as well as the financial insecurities, make ministry an often thankless and heavy load. And George Barna, who does a lot of research about Christianity in the world, he found that ministry leaders are at risk emotionally, relationally, and spiritually. Now, this does not mean that Christ is not with us, that the Spirit is not guiding us and protecting us. It means that ministry is hard. And leaders need companions, and they need spaciousness to recharge with Christ in themselves. So I'm going to talk to you about 3 keys. Now, keys are very small things, but they're necessary. They're easy to get lost or misplaced, and I'm sure that's happened to you. I've locked myself out of the house or my office occasionally. But keys are symbolic for opening ideas and possibilities. And I want to put 3 keys into your hands. And these keys are what leaders need, not what leaders need to know or what leaders need to do, but what they need in order to thrive. And leaders need 3 things. They need safe times, safe places, and safe people. And mentoring communities provide those 3 things. So I want to talk briefly about each one of those. The first key is that leaders need safe times. This is part of God's design. When God created the world, God created time for work and time for rest. There was daytime for sleeping and for work and nighttime for rest. Also, God designed 6 days for work and 1 day for Sabbath rest. So, Robin, we can see your working screen. And what we see in the life of Jesus is that Jesus took time for rest. He physically went away to rest, to pray, to be with his closest friends, to eat together and talk and process with them. He left people to be with his Father and to be with his friends. And ministry leaders today are no exception. Ministry is crowded with responsibilities. There's no time away for rest and reflection. We are tempted to construct a ministry that has little room for anyone but our own agenda and our own drive. On the front line of battle for Christ, we must be able to have spacious times, open times, to listen to the Holy Spirit and to listen to what's going on in our own souls. So I'm asking you, do you have safe times, at least 12 hours regularly dedicated to listening spaciously to God? Listening spaciousness is critical to hearing God. It is critical to getting in touch with one's inner world. Listening spaciousness requires uninterrupted time and stillness, no phones and computers and all that sort of thing. So we can feel the Spirit, the movement of the Spirit returning in our lives. Running a car on empty will not get you very far. Neither will doing ministry on empty. Time away gives God an opportunity to fill us up. So that's the first key, is safe times. The second key, leaders need safe places. Not only must we set aside time as a holy offering to God for listening, we also need a safe place in which to use that time. For instance, if you want a break from work, you leave town and take a vacation, right? Or sometimes you even just go into your office and lock the door so you have a little time to yourself. Safe places means that you leave ministry and your social world behind, and you have gone to a place apart. Safe places mean the leader leaves work and social media behind, so the Spirit can be experienced more clearly. And safe places can be anywhere. They are mainly just away. It helps a lot if you're able to be out in nature, such as a retreat center, because nature can reset our bodies. We are designed for a world, not buildings. So being outdoors in beautiful spaces really can help settle us. However, cities work too. I participated in a mentoring community in Singapore. So I'm asking you, do you go away regularly to a safe place for listening to God? So safe places plus safe times means that the central component is listening to God and to each other. So in order to do that, I need to put into your hand a third key. So we have safe times, safe places. I'm going to put it into your hand a third key. Leaders need safe people. Each of these keys is essential to maximize the transformative power of mentoring communities. I find that ministry leaders are some of the loneliest people in the world because of the complexity of our work. You all know how hard it is to find a safe person to talk to if you are having any kind of difficulty. And we all have them. We all have difficulties. That's the nature of ministry. Jesus constantly had difficulties, but he surrounded himself with people he loved and people who loved him. If you have a difficult problem in your church or your mission, if you feel burnt out, if you feel tempted, if you feel far from God, to whom do you turn? Who prays for you? The real you. Often colleagues or denominational leaders or congregants are not persons to whom you could turn to safely. It's complicated. So do you have a person with whom you can completely be yourself and say whatever you need to say? To hear your deep questions, your stirrings, and your wonderings, who want to help grow you in Christ, who don't question, evaluate, or push back on you, but listen spaciously to you. I think one of the rarest and most treasured treasures, the most cherished treasure on earth, is a friend who loves you and holds you before God. These friends will laugh with you. You have the best of times. They remind you of your story. They will pray diligently for you. They will sit quietly with you while you process what's going on in your soul. They trust what God is doing in you. So with these three keys, safe times, safe places, and safe people, you have a mentoring community. A mentoring community is a gathering, a yearly gathering, usually a yearly gathering of several days, 3 to 5 days, with a mature leader, mentor, and 5 to 10 younger leaders who step away from work and daily life. They go away together to rest and listen to each other and pray for each other. As you can see from the definition, usually mentoring communities are groups with the leader and mentor, and they meet for the long haul of their calling. Leighton's groups have met for 30 years and 25 years. My group has met for 10 years. Others are just beginning. These communities come in many sizes and styles, and what they share in common is Christ, and safe times and safe places, and we're safe people with each other on a regular basis. If you want more information about these communities, please pick up a book. We wrote it for you to help you wherever you are in whatever circumstances to create this for yourself. Mentoring communities do whole life listening. We listen to the stories of every aspect of a leader's life, what's happening physically, relationally, spiritually, professionally. Mentoring communities have their focus on creating space. So it's not crowded with talking and running around to workshops and conferences. It's space to listen together to God and to each other in order to increase one's capacity to love like Christ and to strengthen one's character to be like Christ. I love the people in my group, Space for Grace, with whom I personally have grown in love and character over these 10 years. But instead of just me or Leighton sharing about the value of mentoring communities, we have others in this webinar who I've invited to tell their stories. And first, I would like to introduce 3 members of a group that are here that I call them the Fearless Four. Ken Van Vliet is the senior pastor at Monte Vista Chapel in Turlock, California. Chris Fillingham is the senior pastor at Dayspring Baptist in St. Louis, Missouri. And Mike Larson is a former pastor and now director of Ramada.org in Ridgefield, Washington. And I've invited them to take a couple minutes, 5 minutes to share about their experiences. You need to unmic, Ken.
Okay. Yeah, you might need to unmic, and you might need to, if I need to, I'll try to get you all on screen.
Yeah, they're all here.
Yeah, I think we're here now.
It's great to see everyone. Yeah, my name is Ken Van Vliet. I've been in ministry for 23 years, and my desire for a mentoring community probably began about 8 or 9 years ago, although I didn't know that's what it was called. I'd been in ministry for a long time and was feeling the desire to have a broader conversation, to be in a safe place with people who could have a conversation about my soul and the context I was in. And it's not that I didn't have great people in my context, it's just they couldn't hold the story that I needed held. And so it led to the Doctor of Ministry program and Leadership and Spiritual Formation that Dr. Morse leads at Portland Seminary. And I'll just give a plug for that. It's an incredible program. In that process, she put us into, in retrospect, what are pre-mentoring communities, journey groups. And that was with Chris and Mike and Jason, who wasn't able to be here today. And in that gathering, we grew closer together over those 2 or 3 years through the program. And since that program, our group, the 4 of us, have met one time with all 4 of us, one time with 3 of us. And our space really is spent listening to one another, a lot of spaciousness to hear from God and one another. And these 3 people are some of the most trusted people in my life. I am remarkably grateful for them. They sustain me in ways, God sustains me through them in ways that I can hardly be able to put to words. So thank you for the opportunity.
Great.
Yeah, and So I want to share a little bit about my own experience of being in that group. I've been a pastor now for about 12 years and in various ministry leadership positions before that. And, you know, anybody who's a leader knows exactly what MaryKate was talking about the struggles of being in ministry. And of course, you go to conferences, you read books, you maybe have a spiritual director. All these things are helpful and nourish the soul. But this combination of a mentoring community that gives you those three keys together, it really has a kind of synergy that creates something very different that you don't get from just going on a retreat or just going to a conference or even just having your spiritual director that you're working with. Again, all those things are important, but when it's brought together to have safe space, safe people, and safe time, something unique happens. And I was thinking about what that was for me, the mixture of play and spaciousness and friendships that I just don't have in any other space in my life. I thought about how coming back from those times together, there has been a kind of clarity about my own soul and things that I needed to be attended to over even the next year of things I worked with my spiritual director. There's also a kind of clarity that came to me about the sort of things my church needed to be attended to and what my hopes and dreams were for our church in the coming years. That really was fruit out of that spaciousness of being away from the daily grinds and pressures and everything else. But I think maybe most importantly, what those times together have given me is it's been like an invitation and a call back to myself. Just a deeper sense of remembering who I am, separate from my role, separate from my responsibilities at home, at work, and all of those things, but just a reminder and an invitation to knowing myself again, that I think leaders, we so easily lose. We go off on this work and we lose a sense of who we are. And so that's been some of the real gifts of being a part of this group for me as a pastor and a leader in ministry.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I mean, these men have been just a tremendous gift to my life. And I think that the safe places, I think of it as kind of a sacred place that we have gone back to again and again. I actually like to put up my a lot of times just look at the pictures that I have from our space there on Cannon Beach that we go to, and it brings me back. And I think the way that Chris was talking about it, there are just these clear moments of hearing the voice of Christ that stay with me months and months after that, and just help to recenter me and just to bring me back. And for me in particular, the last time we were there was some real deep grief that I just couldn't work through, and I realized I needed somebody else to observe it, to be seen and not to be alone in that. And it was a very powerful experience for me, and don't have time to go into detail with it, but it's just truly a life-changing thing. And 20 some years of ministry at this point, and I think these mentoring communities are the first time where I could say I wasn't alone. So.
Oh, thank you so much, Ken, Chris, and Mike, for saying these words about your story and the impact of mentoring communities. We appreciate you all so much. And next, we're having Mercy and Ravi David. They work for TMS Global. They're equipping and doing member care. Mercy has a group of women leaders in Southeast Asia and another one in India. And Ravi has a group of senior leaders in India and another group with Asian ministry leaders. So I know Robin will be bringing them up. Hi, Ravi. Hi, Mercy.
Hi. Yeah, go ahead. Okay. Our first introduction to Leighton Ford Ministries communities was in Apple Hill, North Carolina. The presence of God, the safe environment with the presence of God and the wonderful people there was so refreshing that I said we needed one in India. We come from a region where leadership is supposed to be, leaders are supposed to be perfect, and therefore they zip up and continue with their ministries, many a times getting discouraged and burnout. So as she said, I have some ministry groups, and these women, many of these women have been in forefront ministry. And so we have walked together when there have been hard times, loneliness, misunderstanding, opposition, health issues, terminal illness, healing, and death of a spouse, persecution, opposition, even death threats. These mentoring groups or gatherings are times when it has given us a break from the routine, allows us as leaders to set aside the responsibility for a season just to be with friends who love, care, and understand, safe people, and with God. These are times of rest, reflection, times to refocus, rejuvenate, and get back to ministry with renewed strength. Distance has not been a problem for us for communication because we have a WhatsApp group, and through this group, when we are in need, we just mention pray and the need, children's safety, opposition, and the whole group gets together immediately and covers them with prayer. So we have prayed together, cried together, rejoiced together, and it's been so fulfilling and refreshing that the women have started groups of their own. Over to Ravi.
The value of mentoring communities has been deeply appreciated by ministry leaders that we have engaged with. And I think what the LFM ministry has done is just to give clarity in terms of the concept of mentoring communities, and also provided the vocabulary and gave the building blocks to make this happen. And this has been done in non-prescriptive ways and ways that are very simple and scriptural. I think those are some of the highlights of what we've taken away for the privilege we've had of being associated, starting from Apple Hill, as Mercy just mentioned. And from there, the group that I lead is called Mending Nets. It's a group of men from South Asia in the front line of ministries. And one of the things that we talk about is not only getting away for worship and prayer, but also for play. We had our meeting in February this year, just before all the travel restrictions happened. And one of the first things we did was, as we walked out of where we were having our meeting in Malacca, in Malaysia, it was Chinese New Year time, and they were in the mall, they were having an orange eating competition. They were giving prizes for the person who can eat the largest number of oranges within a given time. And there we were, 8 of us sitting across in a mall and stuffing oranges down our mouth. That was so funny, and that was so good. So we have looked at different models. We have tried to have one group of people in a similar stage of life or season of life, and so that some of the issues we talk about are common and relevant to all. We have had another group of senior leaders, like CEOs of mission agencies, come together along with their spouses. And that's another type of group that we have. And a third group that we're beginning to work on is regional leaders in different parts of India and different parts of Asia. By that, we mean people who are established leaders in a local context, but their influence and impact spreads around to the neighboring states in the region. So the Lord is leading us to identify such people out of the network of relationships that we have built over the years. And as the Lord leads us, we're looking at getting into those areas as well. We're prayerfully asking God for wisdom because it's a long-term commitment. It's a lot of work, and we don't want to do more than what God would want us to do. So we're looking at starting it in small ways, but doing it strategically and spirit-led. So we also enjoyed being at Apple Hill, and we tried to replicate a similar thing in India to get a group of people to get envisioned about what the ministry of a mentoring community is. So we were privileged to have MaryKate and also Barry from Canada come and engage with about 30 leaders, and there have been some spin-offs out of that. I conclude by saying that it's been a great time of blessing. All people involved in this eagerly look forward to being over there. Many people ask us, why haven't you included us in many of these? But we very prayerfully and carefully choose people whom the Lord leads us to get involved in. And we see that many people are beginning to replicate what we have been doing with them and urging them to be that person who will encourage others and lead their own mentoring communities as well. We're grateful to God and grateful to LFM. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mercy and Ravi. Appreciate you taking time to be with us and share with us your experiences with mentoring communities. And at this time, we'd like to leave some space for questions. There might be others of you who are in this webinar who've experienced mentoring communities. Particularly, I know that Ole Magnus is here from Lausanne. And Lausanne is committed to whole life generational mentoring. And Ole, I don't know if you would like to say a few words from Lausanne, and if there are others of you that would have questions or something to say. Robin and Dave are managing the chat conversation. Oh, there's Ole. So he's far away. It might be a minute for him to come on. And in the meantime, if you have things you would like to ask Leighton or myself, we are very happy to take a few minutes at the end of this. We are going to stop at 9 on the dot. But and if some of you, there he is. Hi, Ole.
Wow, thank you. That was quite a surprise. Thank you for involving me.
I should have told you that I might call on you, but I knew you were ready in season and out of season.
Well, I should be, the Bible says, so thank you. Wow, yeah. I have such fond memories when I was able to enjoy and join in one of these gatherings in the States. I still carry these memories with me as a very, very important experience with you and Leighton and with Ann Grisel and others. So thank you so much. You're right. I'm working much with the Lausanne movement. I work closely with Ann Grisel as we established the mentoring community. This would never have happened without Ann's tireless work. Then she left it to me to try to pick up and move it from there. So what we are focusing on is whole life mentoring, one-on-one. And as I listen to you now, I see the need for this combination because I do know the upsides of the one-on-one mentoring and the generational, three-generational mentoring, but I also see the need for this mentoring community. And I think I'll look more into this together with a few others, how we may have better combinations of this.
Thank you, Ole. And yeah, with the lead mentor with a group of younger leaders or others in your community, when I meet with mine, I do meet with them one-on-one too. So I get that one-on-one mentoring and I'm available to them, and Leighton is available with his groups to talk. So it maximizes the time rather than so many one-on-one conversations. So thank you so much for taking a few minutes to show your face and speaking on behalf of Lausanne, an amazing movement for which everyone should become really informed about what they're doing all over the world to promote Christ and assist and resource leaders and to get into difficult areas and challenging problems, social problems. This is an amazing, amazing organization. So thank you, Ole, for representing Lausanne for us this morning. And
let me just.
And so there are several questions here. And so Dave, I wondered if you would be willing to just pick questions for Leighton and myself, because I'm seeing there's so many of them, and maybe you could steward the question for us. Would you mind doing that, Dave?
Yeah, sure.
And while Dave's doing that, I just want to say a shout out. Ann Grizzle, I think, is in the webinar, and Ann is the chair of the board of LFM and Mentoring Communities, and she, without her leadership and her, I mean, I have never seen anyone who loves more and works harder than Ann Grizzle. And she has groups herself that she cares for, and so thank you. And Alon Stomp is here, so many great people. So Dave, I'll let you, we have just a few minutes. I know there's some questions. I just want to say for sure that we have tried to anticipate all questions that are, so in the book, there's a big question answer center section at the end. We are also available for follow-up through LFM or Lausanne or myself. You can follow up, and we know we won't be able to get to all the questions, but we certainly don't want to leave your concern or your voice unheard. Okay, Dave, I'm stopping.
Yeah, great. Why don't we start with this one, because I think 12 hours of safe time was both appealing and a little daunting to folks. So here's a good question about that. 12 hours feels like a lot of time and almost not fair to my family if I'm gone for a whole day on my day off. Or is the 12 hours meant within the space of mentoring communities, or is that per day, per week, per month? Can you just sort of unpack the idea of that 12 hours of safe time?
Well, the 12 hours was, it's a big enough time that it would make you go, can I do that? But mentoring communities actually usually meet over a few days. But an empty you is not a helpful you to your family. A you that's burnt out, that hasn't been able to rest. You are shortchanging your family. And even though, it's not, I don't care for my family and I'm going to go off and do this. It's that because I care so much for my family, I need to recharge because my calling is draining and difficult. And then when you come back, and many of us attest to that, we come back recharged, relaxed, hopeful, energized, reconnected with Christ. And it makes you a better husband, wife, to your family. Leighton, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, so just to say 12 hours is a really symbolic thing. To say it's a day, to take a day aside. For me, when I've gone off to a lake place north of Charlotte or the retreat center, I get there about 9 o'clock in the morning, and I'm there till 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But long enough to let my brain slow down, just to be quiet. I go with no agenda except just to be there and to listen. And but you were talking about individual time. As you say, during a mentoring community, we have several days, and we always have time during that. Usually in the afternoon when people are by themselves for 2 or 3 hours. Doesn't have to be 12 hours, but time enough to stop and listen.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. We had several people ask questions along the lines of how you build your mentoring community, who to recruit, what to look for, and if there are vulnerabilities either in building your community from people who are too close to you, or where the blind spots are in building a mentoring community.
Well, that's a huge important question, and we do try to cover that thoroughly in the book Lifelong Leadership. But to say here, it's a discernment process. We, Leighton and myself and Ann and others, all these who have started communities, have been very prayerful about it, about choosing people, inviting people. And the point of starting a community is not just to get your community and you go off and have your happy self. It's so that the people that you gather will have an imagination to start one for the younger leaders that they're serving, and so that it multiplies. That's the whole point of it. So that first, the group that you gather around yourself, who are those people that the Holy Spirit puts on your heart that to bring together. And sometimes you as a lead mentor for younger leaders, sometimes I've known, like in France, where Raphael Anzenberger began a group of peers because there were persons like himself who had no mentor. But it's a thoughtful, prayerful thing, and there are multiple factors to consider. Leighton, you want to add anything to that?
Well, I amen to all that you said, but I would in these groups better than be a group of people from the same ministry or from the same family, to have a safe group of people that you can open up to about things you might not need to share or able to share with them. And so I think diversity of backgrounds, personality, ministries helps to enrich a community like this.
It has been done in churches, but it's a little different. To have a completely safe people environment, you need people with whom you can process whatever's going on in you without having to filter it, or because you don't want to say things that would hurt someone.
Great. There are a couple of people who have asked about how to sustain the value and the contributions of a mentoring community, especially during a time of quarantine like we're in. How do you sustain this when getting together is difficult, when making those sort of direct connections is difficult?
Well, we can do it in Zoom, and every group usually has some way of staying in touch with each other all year long. So in WhatsApp or a Facebook group, my group has a Facebook group and a WhatsApp group. And so we keep in touch all year long. And the thing is, after a few years, they are like your spiritual family, and you know them well. Their stories are etched in you, and your story is etched in them. And it's like a best friend that you don't see that often, but when you get together, it's like you're starting out from where you left off the last time, and you just pick up your story. So they do have a special synergy to them that carries for the long haul of ministry. But we do create ways to stay in touch and understand and pray for each other all year round.
Yeah, I would say it'd be difficult to start a new group now, physically, of course. We can't do that. But you can sustain it in that way. My first group, the Point Group, has we've been meeting for 30 years now, from many different continents, different ministry backgrounds. And but Zoom, during this period of time, we've never done that before. So the fact that we know each other, we've been together physically, loved each other, known each other's stories. Now on Zoom, we can keep that going. That's actually enhanced our relationships in the last few weeks.
And I noticed that we're at the top of the hour, and we are so grateful to all of you who have come and joined us in this webinar. The webinar is being recorded, so it will be available. And lots of links have been sent, so to follow up and however we might come alongside you and support and help you in your journey towards finding and creating a mentoring community, we would like to be able to do that. And so we'll say goodbye and thank you all, and the Lord bless you and keep you each one.
Bye.